Hi, Amelia. Thank you again for taking the time to talk to us today, and congratulations again on your award. Can you talk a little bit about how you first got involved with Mary Shelley and what sort of the initial conversations that you had with the director were?
Yeah, I initially got involved. I think they were still shooting, and the director had been listening to some of my music and to an EP, particularly an EP that I'd written called Visitors, and I think she'd kind of been listening to that while they were shooting. So I think that's kind of, she'd started to consider composers, and then we had a mutual friend in one of the producers, so that the introduction was made. And then I just started kind of working on ideas and demos and sending stuff for them all to listen to, and it just evolved that way, really. And I think that the initial conversations were, about how they wanted to kind of capture the spirit of Mary, and they wanted it to feel not too traditional in the kind of period genre. They wanted it to feel a little bit more contemporary. So we just, and then it was quite a long process before it was actually, my job. It took a while to kind of get there.
Sure, and in terms of the, you mentioned there the sort of the blending between the more traditional approach for a period piece and the more contemporary, perhaps aspects of it. What were the sort of, where did you sort of strike the balance, as it were between the two of those? It was tricky, and I think that you just try things, and actually what we realized was the bolder choices that I was making were working really well, and the producers were really enjoying those, and the director really liked those. So once we kind of realized that, we realized that we could push it further and further without it being too jarring. And then of course you just find that line. But the thing I think it was about layering it within, so that whenever there were lots of synths, there were always organic, real instruments as well. So that there was always kind of something grounding to it and something real. And I think that it was more about creating atmosphere, which I found I just prefer using synthetic, synths for that kind of thing. And then the editor had done a kind of temp track, and he'd put some really bold choices on there, and actually seeing them play and seeing them work freed me up, because it went, well, that worked really well, and that's a completely contemporary pop song, or so it just kind of broadened the horizon, broadened all of the options for me.
How did you arrive at some of the vocals in there? I mean, you've got sort of your standard, well, not standard, but your more expected vocals, and then it goes into quite abstract, sort of pitch bending, kind of experimental stuff. How do you arrive at that?
It was, so I knew I wanted to have voice, and a woman and a female voice really early on. I just felt that was quite important. And I had this idea of, when I was little, we used to always sing, songs in the round. And so I wanted to create a round, essentially, that we could sing and that we could layer up. So that was kind of finding that like 4-piece vocal that basically just looped and could interlock, was the first thing. And then when the kind of, as the story goes on and as things start to get a bit more surreal, and and when she's emotionally kind of, going through a really difficult time and experimenting a bit and kind of pushing boundaries, and also like her creativity kind of awakening. And so then I just wanted to introduce something that was just a bit disorientating and a bit weird and a bit, unsettling. And then also because it's Mary Shelley and it's Gothic, so for me I had to have you go for the choral music. So I thought, well, let's have that single, but let's do a single soprano, and then kind of use that and develop it, so that for the stuff that is, about her nightmares, and you could just make some kind of nightmarish, haunting, Gothic sound. And luckily,
we used Tori, who was the soprano that we used. She was just really amazing at having a go and just experimenting. So a lot of it was down to her, really. We just kind of said, you know, why don't you try a kind of singing scream almost, and then can you go up and down the scale, and we showed her the sequences, and especially the sequence in Geneva, you know, where it's kind of flicking through time and it's back and forth and it's kind of night and day and it's dreamlike, and it's, so we just kind of played that and just said, why don't you just try and, you know, experiment with different sounds and she was just amazing because she came up with all sorts of brilliant things. And then it was about layering those with synths and we had another vocalist who we found in Dublin, who was a countertenor, and he did the same thing. When we went to Dublin, we got him to kind of do similar, so then we could layer up the lower register and the higher register and layer that with synth, and then it kind of made its own texture, I guess.
And just in terms of, I suppose, finding inspiration in general for music, obviously for film music, but for music in general, what's your sort of process where it, obviously on the one hand you have a picture to score to and you have conversations with the director, but when it's, I suppose, when it's just yourself actually writing, what's your sort of process for finding inspiration and finding ideas to write to?
I think it depends if I'm writing a film score or if I'm doing my own release, you know, writing my own pieces. Then, because if it's for a film, then the inspiration really does come from the visual, but I just respond to what I'm seeing usually. And I think Mary Shelley was great because there is a kind of a depth of inspiration just in when it was set, and I do love everything Gothic. I've always loved Gothic novels, and I love where I live is very kind of romantic, and the landscape is, you know, very inspiring. So definitely from you know where I'm living, what I'm listening to, and I tend to just I don't know, go through periods of time where I'm quite like a sponge, and I just listen and I listen and I listen, and then I go, and then usually when I'm writing music, I don't listen to anything, and I can't, you know, and I kind of switch off, and it's all, I guess it's all kind of there in some way. By the time you sit down, it's ready to come out.
What do you listen to? Things we would imagine, but
So much, yeah, all sorts. I mean, I like everything, really. There's nothing that I wouldn't listen to. I've got a very broad kind of taste. But, you know, I listen to lots of film scores, and I listen to a lot of kind of contemporary composers. So lots of, you know, I love Max Richter. You know, the Four Seasons is what I'm listening to, like, obsessively at the moment. I can't stop listening to it. And I love, you know, Hauschka, and I just think there's so many amazing people working at the moment. Niels Fram, Oliver Arnold, Ludovico Einaudi. I mean, there's just so many. I love Michael Nyman. I listen to Michael Nyman a lot. And then I also I love a lot of kind of electronic dance music, and I love lots of classical music, although that's something I'm only just really finding, you know, feeling my way around that world. I listen to a lot of Disney soundtracks at the moment because I've 3 girls, so Moana is always in my head. But yeah, all sorts. I let you know, listen to everything really. I love soul. I love Motown. I love.
I think we kind of picked up on some of those influences as we're talking about Mary Shelley, particularly.
Yeah.
Thinking, you know, it has got that sort of that neoclassical or whatever people want to call it.
Yeah.
Sort of Johann Johansson, Max
Yeah.
Richter.
Yeah. I mean, I love all of that.
Arnold, big fan there as well.
Yeah. I just think it's that layering of using both and kind of just using electronics sometimes to just enhance the beauty of strings, or you know, rather than it being one or the other. I think it's trying to, and I think that's what Johann and those guys do so well.
And I think it works pretty well with Mary Shelley anyway, because you have that sort of juxtaposition of sort of nature and beauty, if you want, sort of traditional, but then also the science and like the electricity, literally electricity, if you want to talk about sort of electronic versions of things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a big inspiration, was the kind of amalgamation of those two things, the nature and the purity of Mary, and then also this spark, this electricity, this galvanization, this kind of fascination with, you know, and science in that time was kind of just coming through, but there was also a kind of magic to it then, because it was also new, and so yeah, I think that was a good kind of jumping off point, was going, well, we've got these two elements, and I wanted the score to have those two elements as well.